I thought I was just a nanny. That was my first mistake. The second was falling in love with the man who hired me. The third was making his daughter speak after 2 years of silence. Because it turns out, Yanis Glazos wasn't a businessman. He was the most dangerous mob boss on the East Coast. And his daughter wasn't sick. She was broken. Like me. That's why I could fix her. That's why he became obsessed with me. And that's why his dead wife's family decided I was too dangerous to live. My name is Anna Rogers. And this is the story of how I saved a little girl, fell in love with a monster, and almost lost everything in a courtroom. 8 weeks earlier, I read an ad for a private nanny position. High pay, live-in, references required. I had the references. What I didn't have was options. My landlord wanted 3 months back rent. My bank account had $217, and my pride was already dead. So I showed up to the address in Greenwich. It wasn't a house. It was a mansion with gates and cameras and a man at the entrance who checked my ID like I was entering a military base. That should have been my first clue. The second clue was Yanis Glazos himself. 42 years old, 6'3", gray at the temples, eyes like winter in the Aegean, cold and assessing, the kind of man who could see through lies because he'd told 1,000 of his own. He didn't smile when he opened the door. He didn't offer his hand. He just said I was early, like it was a test I'd already failed. The interview lasted 20 minutes. He asked about my experience, my education, my family, why I needed the job. I told him the truth, mostly. Single, no kids. Degree in early childhood education. I'd never finished, 2 years working at a daycare in Brooklyn, before it closed. I didn't tell him about the eviction notice. I didn't tell him I hadn't spoken to my parents in 3 years, or that I was so lonely sometimes. I talked to myself just to hear a voice. He didn't need to know that part. Then he listed the rules, 47 of them. No visitors, no posting on social media. No discussing the household with anyone. No leaving the property without approval. Meals provided. Private suite in the West Wing. Weekends off unless needed. The salary was triple what the ad listed. Triple. I should have walked out right then. But I didn't. Because when you're drowning, you don't ask questions about the lifeboat. You just climb in. He hired me on the spot. Said I could start the next day. Then he stood up and walked me to the door without another word. I was halfway to my car when I realized something. He never once mentioned his daughter. Not her name, not her age, not why she needed a nanny in the first place. That was the third clue. And like the others, I ignored it completely. I moved in the next morning. A man named Dimitri carried my 2 suitcases up 3 flights of marble stairs to the West Wing. He didn't speak, didn't look at me, just set the bags down in a bedroom, twice the size of my old apartment, and left. The door clicked shut behind him, heavy and final, like a vault. The room was beautiful. King bed, private bathroom, a window overlooking gardens that probably cost more to maintain than I made in a year, but it felt cold, like a hotel room, not a home. I unpacked quickly, hung my 5 dresses in a closet built for 50, lined up my books on an empty shelf that could hold hundreds. Then I went to find the little girl I was supposed to take care of. Yanis had told me she'd be in the playroom on the 2nd floor. He still hadn't told me her name. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps echoing on marble that was probably imported from somewhere I couldn't pronounce. The playroom door was open. And there she was, 4 years old, maybe. Dark curls, olive skin, enormous brown eyes that tracked me the second I stepped inside. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by toys. Dolls, books, puzzles, stuffed animals. Everything a child could want. But she wasn't playing. She was just sitting there, staring at a wooden puzzle piece in her hand, like it held the answer to a question she'd forgotten how to ask. I smiled, walked closer, kept my voice soft and warm. I told her my name was Anna, that I was going to be spending time with her. I asked if she wanted to play, if she had a favorite game, if she liked puzzles. Nothing. She didn't look at me, didn't respond, just kept staring at that puzzle piece. I tried again, asked if she wanted me to read her a story, pointed to the bookshelf filled with picture books. Still nothing. That's when I realized she wasn't ignoring me. She wasn't shy. This little girl hadn't made a single sound since I walked in. No words, no humming, not even a breath loud enough to hear. Something was wrong. I spent the rest of that first day trying everything: singing, drawing, building blocks, offering snacks. She'd move when I guided her, eat when I placed food in front of her, follow me from room to room. But she never spoke, never smiled. It was like caring for a beautiful ghost. That night, I found Giannis in his office, on the first floor. The door was half open. I could see him behind a massive desk, talking on the phone in a language I didn't recognize. Greek. Maybe. His voice was low, sharp, the kind of tone that made it clear he wasn't asking for anything, he was telling. I knocked. He looked up, ended the call without saying goodbye, and gestured for me to sit. I asked him why he didn't tell me his daughter didn't speak. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, and asked if it was a problem. I said no, but I needed to know. Was it medical, psychological, trauma? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said her name was Sophia. She stopped talking 2 years ago. He didn't say why. I asked if she'd seen doctors, therapists, specialists. He said she'd seen 23 of them. None of them helped. I asked what they said was wrong. He looked at me with those cold gray eyes and said selective mutism, post-traumatic stress, developmental regression. He said the words like they were bullets he was listing, not diagnoses for his own child. Then he told me that if I wanted to quit, I could leave in the morning. No hard feelings, full week's pay. I should have taken it. I should have walked out of that office, packed my bags, and never looked back. But I didn't. Because I'd seen the way Sophia held that puzzle piece. Like it was the only solid thing in a world that had gone liquid and strange. I knew that feeling, so I told him I wasn't quitting. He nodded once, like he'd expected that answer, and went back to his phone. I stood up to leave. That's when I saw it, on the corner of his desk, half hidden under a stack of papers. A handgun, black and heavy, sitting there like it was a stapler or a paperweight. Casual, normal. I froze. Giannis followed my gaze, then looked back at me. He didn't explain, didn't apologize. He just asked if that was going to be a problem too. I said no. Another lie. I went back to my room and locked the door, lay in that big expensive bed and stared at the ceiling. And I wondered what kind of man kept a loaded gun on his desk in a house with a 4-year-old. I'd find out soon enough. Day 3, I woke up at 2 in the morning to voices downstairs. Shouting in Greek, the sound of something heavy being dragged across marble. I stayed in my room. Door locked, lights off. Heart hammering. In the morning, there was a dark stain on the foyer floor that Dmitri was scrubbing with bleach. He didn't look at me when I walked past. I didn't ask. Day 4, a man in an expensive suit arrived with 4 others. They all carried guns, not even trying to hide them. They spoke to Giannis in his office for 3 hours, voices raised, fists on the table. I kept Sophia in the playroom, upstairs, put on cartoons, turned the volume up. She sat on the couch, silent, staring at the screen but not really watching. Day 5, I saw 2 men patrolling the grounds with rifles. Not security uniforms, just black tactical gear, earpieces, the kind of setup you see in movies about wars or heists. That night, I finally Googled him. Yanis Glezos, 42, born in Thessaloniki, owner of 3 shipping companies, 2 restaurants, a dozen properties across Connecticut and New York. Clean record, no arrests, nothing that explained the guns or the men or the blood. But then I found it. A news article from 8 months ago, buried on page 3 of a local site. Greek shipping magnate questioned in federal racketeering investigation. Allegations of money laundering, connections to organized crime. No charges filed. Another article, older. Wife killed in car accident 3 years ago. Elena Glezos, 29, died instantly when her vehicle went off a bridge in Stanford. Authorities ruled it an accident. Her family claimed otherwise. I closed my laptop, sat there in the dark, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe he was just rich. Maybe rich people kept guns and hired armed security and had mysterious meetings at 2 in the morning. Maybe. But I didn't believe it. Day 7. Everything changed. It was late afternoon, almost dinner time. Sophia and I were in the playroom. I was reading to her, not expecting a response, just filling the silence with words. She was sitting next to me on the couch, closer than usual, her shoulder pressed against mine, her eyes on the pictures in the book. I turned the page, and she said it, quiet, barely a whisper. Anna, my name. I froze. Looked down at her. She was staring at the book, not at me like she hadn't just spoken for the first time in 2 years. I asked if she'd said my name. She didn't answer, but her hand reached out. Small fingers wrapping around mine, holding tight. I felt something crack open in my chest. Not breaking, opening, like a door I'd kept locked for years. I squeezed her hand back, told her I was right here, that I wasn't going anywhere. She didn't say anything else, but she didn't let go either. I didn't see Yanis standing in the doorway. I don't know how long he'd been there, but when I finally looked up, he was watching us. His face was unreadable, that same cold mask he always wore, but his hands were clenched into fists at his sides, and something in his eyes looked like pain. He turned and walked away without a word. That night, after Sophia was asleep, he came to find me. I was in the kitchen, making tea. He stood in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking more human than I'd ever seen him. He asked what I did. I said I didn't do anything. I just read to her. He shook his head, said 23 specialists couldn't get her to speak. I'd been here 7 days, and she said my name. I told him maybe she just needed someone who wasn't trying to fix her. Maybe she needed someone who was just there. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said his wife used to say something similar, that Sophia didn't need doctors. She needed love. His voice cracked on that last word, just slightly, barely noticeable, but I heard it. I asked what happened to his wife. He said it was an accident. I asked if he believed that. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the counter, stood close enough that I could smell his cologne, cedar and something darker. He told me his wife's family blames him, said he got her killed with his business, his choices, his world. They've been trying to take Sophia ever since. I asked if that's why he had armed men outside. He said yes. Then he said something that made my blood go cold. He said I should be careful too, that anyone close to Sophia becomes a target, anyone who matters to her. I asked if he was trying to scare me. He said no. He was trying to warn me. Then he left. I stood there holding my tea, watching the steam rise, thinking about little girls who stop talking, and men with guns and families who fight over children like their property. I should have quit right then. Should have packed my bags and run. But I kept seeing Sophia's face, the way she'd looked at me when she said my name, like I was the first solid thing she'd found in years. Week 2 passed in a strange rhythm. Sophia started saying more. Not sentences, just words. Anna, play, stay. Each one felt like a miracle. Yanis watched from a distance, never interrupted, never interfered. But I'd catch him sometimes, standing in doorways or at the top of stairs, just watching us with that unreadable expression. One night, Sophia insisted he join us for dinner, pulled his hand, wouldn't let go until he sat down. It was awkward at first. Him at one end of the table, me at the other, Sophia between us in her booster seat. But then Sophia laughed at something, just a small sound, barely a giggle. But it was the first time I'd heard her laugh. Yanis froze, looked at her like she'd just performed a miracle. And when he looked at me, there was something different in his eyes. Gratitude, yes, but something else too. Something that made my stomach flip and my face go hot. I looked away first. Week 3, the tension changed. Every time we were in the same room, the air felt thicker. Every accidental touch, handing him a plate or passing in a hallway, felt like a spark. I told myself it was nothing. He was my employer. I was the nanny. This was a job. But late at night, alone in my room, I couldn't stop thinking about the way he looked at me, like I was something precious and dangerous at the same time. Day 19, we had a moment. Late night, Sophia was asleep. I was on the terrace reading. He came out with 2 glasses of wine, asked if he could join me. We talked, really talked, not just about Sophia or rules or schedules. He told me about growing up in Greece, about coming to America with nothing, about building everything from the ground up. I told him about my childhood, about why I never finished my degree, about feeling like I'd spent my whole life looking for something I couldn't name. The conversation went on for hours, and at some point, We'd moved closer. His hand was on the armrest between us. Mine was inches away. I could feel the heat of him. I looked up. He was already looking at me. We both leaned in, and Sophia screamed. We broke apart, ran upstairs. She'd had a nightmare. I held her while she cried, rocked her back to sleep. When I finally got her settled and turned around, Yanis was gone. We didn't talk about it. Day 21, everything shifted again. A package arrived. Flowers. Beautiful, expensive, white lilies in a crystal vase. Dmitri brought them to Yanis's office. I was walking past when I heard him curse in Greek, loud and vicious. He came out holding a card. His face was white with rage. He looked at me, asked if I could read Greek. I said no. He translated. Sophia blooms, as Eleni bloomed, before you withered her. It was signed, the Raptis family. I asked who they were. He crumpled the card in his fist, said they were his dead wife's family, and they'd just declared war. Day 22. A man in a suit arrived at 8 in the morning. Not one of Yanis's men, someone different. A process server. He handed Yanis a thick manila envelope and left without a word. I was in the kitchen with Sophia, making breakfast. I heard Yanis tear it open, heard the silence that followed, the kind of silence that's louder than shouting. He called for Dmitri, told him to get the lawyer on the phone immediately. Then he saw me standing in the doorway. He looked at Sophia, told me to take her upstairs. His voice was flat, controlled, but his hands were shaking. I took Sophia to the playroom, put on her favorite movie, gave her crayons and paper, told her I'd be right back. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes, said, "Anna, stay." I promised I would. Then I went back downstairs. Yanis was in his office, door half open. I could hear him on the phone, speaking in Greek, his voice hard and clipped. I knocked. He looked up, gestured for me to come in. He hung up the phone, sat back in his chair and just stared at the papers in front of him for a long moment. Then he said the Raptis family was suing for custody of Sophia, full custody, claiming he was an unfit father. I asked on what grounds. He laughed, bitter and sharp, said, "Take your pick. Criminal activity, violent associations, unsafe home environment." They had evidence. Photos of armed men on the property, records of police investigations, documentation of every threat and incident from the past 3 years. I sat down without being asked. Asked what he was going to do. He said fight. But he needed me to understand something. The Raptis family didn't want Sophia out of love. They wanted her because she's the sole heir to her mother's estate. 15 million in trust funds, property in Greece, controlling shares in family businesses. If they get custody, they control everything until she turns 18, and they would make sure she never turned 18. I felt my stomach drop, asked what he meant. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, said the Raptis family had been trying to take Sophia since Elena died. This lawsuit was just the latest attempt. Before this, there'd been 2 kidnapping attempts, 1 bribe offer to a former nanny, and 1 accident that wasn't an accident. He said they didn't need Sophia alive, they just needed her long enough to transfer assets. Then they'd arrange another car accident, another tragedy. I asked why he was telling me this. He said because I needed to know what I'd walked into. Because Sophia had said my name. Because she trusted me. And that made me a target. He pulled out a file, slid it across the desk. I opened it. It was all about me. My background check, my employment history, my finances, my family. Everything. He said he'd had me investigated before he hired me. He knew I was broke. Knew I was alone. Knew I'd take the job, because I had no choice. I asked why he chose me then. He said because I needed her as much as she needed me. Because desperate people don't ask questions. And because he could tell, the moment I walked in for the interview, that I understood what it felt like to be broken. I should have been angry, should have felt violated, but instead I just felt seen. For the first time in years, someone saw me. Not the version I pretended to be. The real me. He said there was something else I needed to know. The Raptis family would come after me too. Not to hurt me, at least not at first. If they won custody, they'd need me, because Sophia only spoke to me. only trusted me. Without me, she'd collapse. And a collapsed child looks bad in court. So they'd make me an offer. More money than I'd ever seen. A contract I couldn't refuse. They'd force me to come with Sophia. I asked what would happen if I said no. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said they'd eliminate me. Because without me, Sophia would stop functioning again. And a non-functioning child could be institutionalized. Out of sight. Easy to control. I felt cold all over. Asked if he was saying I was trapped. He said yes. By him. By the Raptors family. By Sophia herself. I was the only person keeping that little girl alive. And everyone knew it. I stood up. Started to walk out. He called my name. I turned back. He said he was sorry. That he never meant for this to happen. That if I wanted to leave right now, he'd pay me enough to disappear. Start over somewhere they'd never find me. I asked about Sophia. He said he'd handle it. Find another way. We both knew he was lying. There was no other way. I said I wasn't leaving. He asked why. I said because Sophia said my name. Because she held my hand. Because for the first time in my life someone needed me and I wasn't going to run. He stood up. Walked around the desk until he was standing in front of me. Close enough that I had to look up to meet his eyes. He said I was either very brave or very stupid. I said, probably both. And then he smiled. It was the first real smile I'd ever seen from him. It changed his entire face, made him look younger, almost gentle. He said he'd keep me safe. That was a promise. I said I'd keep Sophia safe. That was mine. The next day, everything changed. Security doubled, cameras everywhere. I wasn't allowed to leave the property. Sophia and I moved from the west wing to the main house, rooms right next to Yanis's office. Protocol, he called it. But it felt like house arrest. We were together constantly. Him working while Sophia and I played nearby. Him joining us for every meal. Him checking on us multiple times a day. The proximity was suffocating. And it was intoxicating. Because every time he walked into a room, my heart jumped. Every time our hands brushed passing a plate or a book, I felt electricity. Every time Sophia fell asleep and it was just the two of us, the tension was so thick, I could barely breathe. Day 24, 25, 26. Nothing happened. But everything was happening. The way he looked at me across the dinner table. The way his voice softened when he said my name. The way he stood just a little too close when he didn't have to. Day 28. Sophia was in bed. I was on the terrace, trying to clear my head. He came out, stood at the railing next to me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said this couldn't happen. I asked what. He said whatever was building between us. Said I was Sophia's nanny. Said he was in the middle of a custody battle. Said we were already under scrutiny. An inappropriate relationship would destroy everything. I said I understood. I didn't move. Neither did he. He turned to look at me. Said he'd spent 3 years avoiding this. Avoiding feeling anything for anyone. Because everyone he loved ended up dead or destroyed. He said he couldn't do that to me. I said maybe it wasn't his choice. Maybe I got to decide what risks I took. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering on my cheek. Said I didn't understand what I was asking for. I said then, show me. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry and full of 3 weeks of tension that had nowhere else to go. I kissed him back, hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. We broke apart, both breathing hard. He rested his forehead against mine, whispered something in Greek. I didn't understand. Then he stepped back, said it was a mistake, that it couldn't happen again, that we both needed to forget it. He walked inside, left me standing there, lips still burning, heart cracked open and bleeding. I touched my mouth, could still feel him there. And I knew forgetting was impossible. This man had already ruined me. The next morning, he wouldn't look at me, spoke to me in clipped professional tones, avoided being in the same room unless Sophia was there. It was like the kiss never happened. Except it did, and we both knew it. Sophia noticed, asked why Daddy was sad, asked why Anna looked like she wanted to cry. I told her everything was fine. Another lie in a house built on them. but Sophia was 4. Not stupid. She stopped smiling as much, started watching us with those big, worried eyes, like she could feel the distance growing and didn't know how to fix it. Neither did I, because Yanis was right. This was impossible. I was the nanny. He was my employer. We were in the middle of a legal battle that could cost him his daughter, and somewhere out there, a family that wanted us both dead was watching our every move. But none of that changed the fact that I was falling in love with him, and that was the most dangerous thing I could possibly do. Days 29 through 33 were torture. Yanis avoided me like I was contagious. He'd leave a room when I entered, changed his schedule, so we were never alone. Spoke to me only when absolutely necessary, and even then it was brief, professional, cold. I told myself it was for the best, that he was right to put distance between us, that I needed to focus on Sophia, not on the way my chest ached every time he looked through me like I was invisible. But Sophia noticed everything. She'd ask why Daddy didn't eat dinner with us anymore, why he didn't read bedtime stories, why Anna was quiet all the time now. I didn't have answers. Just more lies and forced smiles that didn't reach my eyes. Day 34, everything came to a head. Sophia had a nightmare, the worst one yet. She woke up screaming, calling for her mother in Greek. I ran to her room, held her while she sobbed, rocked her, sang to her, whispered that she was safe. Nothing worked. She was inconsolable. Yanis appeared in the doorway, still in his clothes from earlier, like he hadn't even tried to sleep. He stood there watching us, hands clenched at his sides. I looked at him, asked for help without saying a word. He crossed the room, sat on the other side of Sophia's bed, started speaking to her in Greek, voice soft and low. I didn't understand the words, but Sophia did. She reached for him. He pulled her into his arms, still speaking that gentle stream of Greek. And slowly, gradually, she calmed down. Her breathing evened out. Her grip on his shirt loosened. Within 10 minutes, she was asleep again. He laid her down carefully, pulled the blanket up to her chin, brushed hair off her forehead with a tenderness that made my throat tight. Then he stood up, started to walk out. I followed him into the hallway, closed Sophia's door softly behind us. He turned to face me. We stood there, in the dim hallway light, 2 feet apart, neither of us speaking. I said we couldn't keep doing this, that Sophia was suffering because of the tension between us. He said I was right. Then he said he'd been thinking that maybe I'd gotten too close to Sophia, that she was becoming too dependent on me, and when this was all over, when the custody battle was done, I'd leave, get back to my real life. And Sophia would be devastated. I stared at him, asked if he really believed that. He said it didn't matter what he believed. It was the logical conclusion. Better to end it now before Sophia got more attached. Before anyone got more attached. I asked if he was firing me. He said no, he was letting me go. For Sophia's sake, I felt something break inside my chest. Asked if this was really about Sophia, or if he was just scared. He didn't answer. Just looked at me with those cold gray eyes and said I could finish out the week. Give Sophia time to adjust. Then he walked away. Left me standing in that hallway, trembling with rage and heartbreak. Day 35. I told Sophia I was leaving. I sat her down in the playroom, held her hands, tried to explain in words a 4-year-old could understand. I said I had to go home, that I'd been away for a long time, that she was doing so well now. She didn't need me anymore. She stared at me. Then she said, no, just that. No. I said I was sorry, that I didn't want to go, but I had to. She shook her head, said, Anna, stay. Sophia needs Anna. Her voice was getting louder, more desperate. I told her she'd be okay, that Daddy would take care of her, that maybe they'd find another nanny, someone even better than me. She started crying, said, no, no other Anna, only Anna. Then she switched to Greek. Nay. I didn't know what it meant, but I heard the desperation. She grabbed my arms, shook me, said, Anna, don't go, please. I was crying too now. Told her I loved her, that I'd never forget her. She screamed, a raw, broken sound that shattered what was left of my heart. Yanis appeared in the doorway. I looked at him, tears streaming down my face. Said, "You do it." "I can't." He came over, started to pull Sophia away from me. She fought him, kicked, screamed, clawed at his arms. She kept screaming my name, over and over. "Anna, Anna, Sagapo, Anna." I didn't know what Sagapo meant, but the way she said it, I knew it was everything. Yanis finally got her away from me, held her against his chest while she fought him. He looked at me over her head. His eyes were devastated. He said, "Go." I went, grabbed my bags, already packed, walked out the front door while Sophia's screams echoed through the mansion. Dmitri drove me to a hotel. I sat in the back seat, numb and hollow. When we arrived, he handed me an envelope. Cash, enough for a month's rent, anywhere. More than Yanis owed me. I took it, went up to a sterile hotel room, sat on the bed, and for the first time since I was 16, I let myself fall apart. Days 36 through 42 were a blur. I stayed in that hotel room, ordered room service, stared at the ceiling, tried not to think about Sophia's screams, tried not to wonder if she was talking again, if she was eating, if she was okay. I knew she wasn't, because I wasn't okay either. My phone rang constantly, unknown numbers. Probably Yanis, checking if I'd really left town. I never answered. What was there to say? Day 40, a friend from my old daycare job called. She'd heard I was back in the city. Wanted to get coffee. I said maybe later. She said she'd seen something on the news. A wealthy Greek businessman under investigation. His daughter hospitalized. My blood went cold. I asked what she meant. She said it was probably nothing. Just a story she'd half heard on the local news. Something about a custody battle. I hung up, grabbed my laptop, searched for Yanis's name and hospitalization, found it. Local news. 3 paragraphs. Barely a story. 4-year-old daughter of shipping magnate Yanis Glezos admitted to Greenwich Hospital for dehydration and malnutrition. Sources say the child had refused to eat for 3 days. Father declined to comment. Custody hearing scheduled for next month. 3 days. Sophia hadn't eaten for 3 days. I grabbed my jacket, ran out of the hotel, caught a cab to Greenwich Hospital. Day 44. I broke every rule. Walked into that hospital without calling. Found out what room she was in by lying to a nurse. Said I was family. Took the elevator to pediatrics. Found her room. The door was open. Sophia was in the bed, IV in her tiny arm, looking so small and pale against the white sheets. Yanis wasn't there, just a guard standing outside. He tried to stop me. I pushed past him. Walked into that room. Sophia's eyes were closed. But the second I said her name, they opened. She stared at me, like I was a ghost she didn't dare believe in. Then she whispered, "Anna." I crossed to the bed, took her hand, said, "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here." She started crying. Said Anna came back. Anna Ella back. It was a mix of English and Greek, all jumbled together. She threw her arms around my neck, held on like I might disappear again. I held her back, told her I was sorry, that I shouldn't have left, that I was here now. The guard had left, gone to find Yanis. Probably. I didn't care. I just held Sophia, felt her breathing, steady and real. 10 minutes later, Yanis walked in. He stopped in the doorway, just stared at us. Sophia was curled against me, finally calm. His face was wrecked, dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it, or hadn't slept at all. He said my name. I looked up at him, and I saw it. The man who'd pushed me away, who'd said this was for the best, who'd let Sophia scream while I walked out. He'd been drowning without us, just like we'd been drowning without him. He said we needed to talk. I said yes. We did. That night, hospital hallway, 2 in the morning. Sophia asleep. Finally, monitors beeping steady. Me and Yanis, sitting on uncomfortable plastic chairs, both exhausted. He spoke first, said he'd lied. That sending me away wasn't about Sophia getting too attached. It was about him being terrified. He said everyone he loved ended up dead. His wife, his parents, friends who'd worked for him. He said loving people was a death sentence. And he'd looked at me, at the way Sophia loved me, at the way he was starting to feel. And he panicked, pushed me away before the universe could take me to. I asked if he really thought that would work. He laughed, broken and tired. Said obviously not. Said Sophia had stopped eating the day after I left. Stopped talking again by day 3. They'd tried 2 new nannies. She'd screamed until they left. Said the doctors told him she was giving up. That if she didn't start eating soon, they'd have to put in a feeding tube. And then I'd walked through that door, and she'd said my name. I told him I couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't be just the nanny. Couldn't be someone he pushed away when he got scared. I said either I was more than that, or I was nothing. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, be more. Said, come back, not as an employee, as someone who matters. Please. I asked what that meant. He said he didn't know yet, but he was tired of pretending. He didn't need me. Tired of pretending this was just a job. Tired of being alone. I asked if he was saying what I thought he was saying. He looked at me, said, I love you. Just like that. No grand gesture, no perfect moment. Just the truth. Raw and simple. I said I loved him too. And for the first time in 8 days I could breathe again. Days 45 through 49 felt like a dream. Sophia came home from the hospital, and suddenly everything was different. I wasn't the nanny anymore. I didn't have a job title. Didn't have set hours or boundaries. I was just there, part of the family. Sophia noticed immediately. Asked if Anna was staying forever now. Yanis looked at me. Said, if she wants to. I said I wanted to. Sophia smiled, the biggest smile I'd seen from her. Said, good, because I love Anna. Those words. So simple for her, so enormous for us. She was speaking in full sentences now. Not all the time, not perfectly, but enough. She'd chatter about her toys, ask questions, tell us stories that didn't quite make sense. Every word felt like a miracle. Yanis was different too. He didn't hide anymore. Didn't pretend he didn't care. He'd reach for my hand at dinner. Kiss my forehead when he thought Sophia wasn't looking. She was always looking. And she'd giggle. Say, Daddy likes Anna. He'd say, yes, I do. No shame, no hesitation. It was terrifying. And it was perfect. But we both knew it couldn't last. Week 8, the lawyers started preparing us for the custody hearing. Depositions, document reviews, strategy sessions. They asked me questions for hours. How long had I known Yanis? What was my relationship with Sophia? Had I witnessed any violence? Any illegal activity? Any behavior that would suggest an unfit parent? I told them the truth. Mostly. Said I'd seen armed security, but never violence directed at Sophia. Said Yanis was attentive, protective, loving. Said Sophia had thrived under his care. They asked about our relationship. I said it was personal. They said it could be used against us. That the Raptis family would paint it as inappropriate. A man taking advantage of a desperate employee. Yanis told them to figure it out, that I wasn't going anywhere. Week 9 felt like holding our breath. The hearing was 3 weeks away. Every day felt like counting down to an execution. Sophia sensed it. She'd ask why everyone was so serious, why Daddy had so many meetings, why men in suits kept coming to the house. I tried to explain in words she'd understand. Said some people wanted her to live with them instead of with Daddy. She asked who. I said her mother's family. She got very quiet. Then she said, I don't know them. I said I knew. She said, I want to stay with Daddy. And Anna. I told her we were going to try very hard to make that happen. She said, promise? I couldn't. Day 64. It started like any other day. Sophia had an appointment with her court-ordered psychologist at 10 in the morning. Routine evaluation, part of the custody assessment. Dimitri was driving, 2 guards in the car with us. Protocol. I sat in the back with Sophia. She was nervous, fidgeting with her seatbelt. I held her hand, told her the doctor was nice, that we'd get ice cream after. She said okay. We arrived at the medical building. Dimitri pulled into the parking garage, 2nd level. The 2 guards got out first, checked the area, gave the all clear. I unbuckled Sophia, opened the door. That's when everything exploded. 4 men came out of nowhere, 2 from behind concrete pillars, two from a parked van. They were armed, moving fast. One of our guards shouted, pulled his weapon, then gunfire. Loud, echoing in the concrete space. I grabbed Sophia, pulled her down behind the car door, covered her body with mine. She was screaming. The sound cut through everything, high and terrified. I heard Dimitri shouting in Greek. More gunfire. One of our guards went down. Blood on the concrete. The attackers were trying to get to our car. To Sophia. Then tires screeched. Multiple vehicles. Coming fast. More men. But these were ours. Yanis's voice. Cutting through the chaos. Shouting orders in Greek. I couldn't see him. Just pressed Sophia's face against my chest. Tried to shield her from everything. The gunfire intensified. Then stopped. Sudden, awful silence. Yanis was there, pulling me up, checking me for injuries, asking if I was hurt, if Sophia was hurt. I said we were okay, but we weren't. Sophia was staring, eyes wide, face white, looking at something behind me. I turned. Two of the attackers were dead, blood pooling under their bodies. Two more on their knees, hands behind their heads. Yanis's men holding guns to their skulls. Sophia had seen all of it. Yanis scooped her up, covered her eyes with his hand. But it was too late. She'd already seen. He carried her to his car. Days 69 and 70 were the longest of my life. I sat in that hotel room, staring at walls, trying to convince myself I'd done the right thing. The hearing was in 2 days, then 1 day, then tomorrow. And I was alone. I'd run again. Just like I always did when things got hard, when people got too close, when love started to hurt. I dressed it up as sacrifice. Told myself I was leaving to help Yanis, to protect Sophia. But sitting there in the silence, I had to face the truth. I was scared. Scared of staying and watching them lose. Scared of the Raptis family coming after me. Scared of being wanted and needed and loved. Because people who loved me always left. My parents had barely noticed when I moved out at 18. My college boyfriend had cheated with my roommate. Every job, every friendship, every connection I'd ever made had ended with me walking away first, before they could reject me, before they could realize I wasn't worth keeping. Sophia had said my name, had held my hand, had loved me without conditions or reservations. And Yanis had looked at me like I was something precious. Had said I love you in a hospital hallway at 2 in the morning. Had chosen me. Not because I was perfect or fixed or easy, but because I was broken in ways that matched his broken places. And I'd run. I'd left them when they needed me most. Not to protect them, to protect myself. I thought about Sophia's face when I told her I was leaving again. That tired acceptance. Like she'd known all along. I'd go, because everyone always left her too. Her mother had died. Her father had retreated into cold distance. Nanny, after Nanny had failed and quit. And then I'd come. Made her trust me. Made her love me. And left. Twice. I thought about Yanis. About the way he'd pushed me away after that kiss. The way he'd fired me. Told me Sophia was too attached. He'd been running too. From the same fear. That loving someone meant losing them. That caring was just setting yourself up for devastation. We'd both been so terrified of pain that we'd created it ourselves. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city lights, and I made a decision. I wasn't running anymore. Sophia needed me, not someday after the hearing, not when it was safe and easy. Now, in that courtroom, I was going to walk in there without an invitation, and I was going to fight for her, for them, for us, because maybe I wasn't perfect. Maybe I was broke and unfinished and damaged, but I loved that little girl, and I loved her father. And for the first time in my life, I was going to stay, even if it hurt, especially if it hurt. Meanwhile, Yanis was having his own reckoning. I didn't know this then. He told me later how he'd spent those 2 days alone with Sophia, how she'd barely spoken, barely eaten, how she'd look at the door every time it opened, hoping it was me. He tried everything. Reading to her, playing games, making her favorite foods. Nothing worked. She'd just sit there, small and sad and silent, and he'd realized this was his fault. Not the custody battle, not the Raptus family. This, Sophia's pain, my absence, the fact that everyone he loved ended up broken. He'd spent his whole life pursuing control, building an empire, eliminating threats, calculating every risk, being perfect. Because he'd believed, somewhere deep down, that if he just did everything right, if he was strong enough, smart enough, careful enough, nothing bad would happen. But Elena had died anyway, in a car accident he couldn't prevent. Sophia had stopped talking, despite all his money, all his power, all the specialists he'd hired. And I'd left because he'd pushed me away. Because control was an illusion. He'd been trying to make the world safe, trying to eliminate danger through sheer force of will. But life didn't work that way. Love didn't work that way. Sophia hadn't started talking again because he'd found the right doctor, or the right treatment, or the right anything. She'd started talking because of me, because I'd sat with her, because I'd loved her without trying to fix her, without needing her to be anything other than what she was. And he'd fallen in love with me, not because I was safe, not because I fit into his controlled world, but because I was chaos, because I'd walked into his house and broken all his rules and made him feel things he'd sworn he'd never feel again. Love was terrifying. It was messy and unpredictable, and completely beyond his control. It meant giving someone the power to destroy you, and trusting they wouldn't. He looked at Sophia, at her sad little face, and he made a decision. Tomorrow, in that courtroom, he was going to tell the truth. All of it. Not the careful, calculated version his lawyers had prepared. The real truth. That he was a criminal. That his world was violent. That Sophia had witnessed terrible things because of his choices. But also that he loved her. That he was trying. That he'd changed everything about his life to keep her safe. That he wasn't perfect, but he was hers. And if the judge took her away, at least Sophia would know. That he'd tried. That he hadn't hidden. That he'd loved her enough to be honest, even if honesty cost him everything. He pulled Sophia onto his lap. She curled against his chest, small and warm and trusting. He whispered to her in Greek, told her he was sorry, that he'd been scared, that he'd made mistakes, but he loved her more than anything in the world. Sophia whispered back, I know, Daddy. Then, will Anna come back? He said he hoped so. Said he'd do everything in his power to make sure she did. Sophia said, good. Then she fell asleep in his arms. And Yanis sat there holding his daughter, preparing to walk into court tomorrow and lay his entire soul bare, win or lose, truth or consequences. He was done running. We both were. Day 71, the custody hearing. I wasn't supposed to be there. I'd left, stepped away, removed myself from the equation. But I woke up that morning and got dressed, put on the one professional outfit I owned, called a cab to the courthouse, and walked through those doors like I had every right to be there. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Formal, cold, intimidating. Yanis was already seated at a table with his lawyers. He looked exhausted, but composed, wearing a dark suit, hair combed back, every inch the successful businessman, until you looked at his eyes. Then you saw the man who hadn't slept in days. The Raptus family sat across the aisle. Don Christos, silver-haired and distinguished, his son Marco, younger, harder, both dressed impeccably, both looking like concerned family members who just wanted what was best for their poor orphaned niece. I knew better. Yanis saw me as I walked in. His entire body went rigid. Eyes locked on mine, questioning. I gave him a small nod. I'm here. I'm staying. Something shifted in his expression. Not relief, exactly, but something like hope. The judge entered. Honorable Margaret Chen, 50s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense demeanor. She called the hearing to order. The Raptus family presented their case first. Their lawyer was good. Smooth, persuasive, devastating. He laid it out systematically. Yanis Gledzos was under active FBI investigation for racketeering and money laundering. He'd been arrested twice in the past 5 years. His home was staffed with armed criminals. He conducted illegal business from a residence where a child lived. Then came the parking garage footage. They played it. Grainy security camera video from multiple angles. The attack. The gunfire. Sophia screaming. Bodies on the concrete. Yanis arriving with 20 armed men, ending the situation with lethal force. The lawyer paused the video, pointed at Sophia's face. That little girl witnessing murder. He said this was Sophia's daily reality. Violence. Trauma. Danger. He said no child should grow up in a war zone. Then he brought up me. Said Yanis had engaged in an inappropriate relationship with his employee, a vulnerable young woman he had power over. Said it demonstrated poor judgment, possible exploitation. Said I'd left twice. Once when things got difficult, again right before the hearing. Said I was unreliable. That Sophia's attachment to me was unhealthy, that my presence had made everything worse. I sat there, listening to myself be dissected, reduced to a liability. A mistake, the lawyer concluded. Said the Raptis family could provide stability, safety, normalcy. Said they had a clean record, legitimate businesses, a loving home. Said Sophia deserved better than what Yanis Glezos could offer. The judge asked Yanis if he wanted to respond. He stood up. His lawyers looked nervous. This wasn't the script they'd prepared. Yanis looked at the judge. And he told the truth. He said yes. He was under investigation. Yes. He had a criminal record. Yes. His business operated in gray areas of the law. He said he'd made choices he wasn't proud of. That violence had been part of his world. That Sophia had witnessed things no child should see. He didn't make excuses, didn't minimize, just stated facts. Then he said something his lawyers definitely hadn't prepared. He said the parking garage attack was orchestrated by the Raptis family, that they'd tried to kidnap Sophia twice before, that this custody battle wasn't about love. It was about control, about $15 million in trust funds and business interests. He said if they got custody, Sophia wouldn't live to see 18. The Raptis lawyer objected. Called it slander, baseless accusations. The judge asked if Yanis had proof. He said the two attackers they'd captured had talked, named who hired them. He submitted documents, recordings, evidence his people had gathered. The judge reviewed them. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Then Yanis talked about Sophia, about how she'd stopped speaking for 2 years after her mother died. How specialist after specialist had failed. How he'd failed. He said he'd hired Anna Rogers out of desperation. And she'd made Sophia speak in 7 days. Not through therapy. Through love. He said Anna had left to protect his case. To remove ammunition from the Raptis family. That she'd sacrificed her own happiness for Sophia's well-being. That she'd proven twice she'd do anything for his daughter. He said he loved me. Said it right there in open court. That yes, our relationship was complicated, but it was real, and it was the best thing that had happened to him in 3 years. The judge asked where I was. I stood up, said I was right here. She looked at me, asked if I'd been subpoenaed. I said no. She asked why I was here. I said, because Sophia needed me, and I'd made her a promise. The judge asked if I wanted to testify. I said yes. They swore me in. Put me on the stand, and I told my story. Not the sanitized version, the real one. I said I'd taken the job because I was broke and desperate. That I'd stayed because Sophia said my name. That I'd fallen in love with both of them. That I'd left because I was scared. And I'd come back because I was done being scared. I said Sophia wasn't just a job to me. She was my heart. I said Yanis wasn't perfect, but he loved his daughter more than anything in this world. I said the Raptis family didn't want Sophia. They wanted money. And I'd die before I let them have her. The Raptis lawyer tried to discredit me. Called me biased. Emotionally involved. Unreliable. I said yes. To all of it. I said I was absolutely biased. Because I loved that little girl, and love wasn't a weakness. It was the only thing that mattered. The judge called for a recess. We waited for 2 hours. When we came back, she had her decision. She said the evidence against the Raptis family was compelling enough to warrant investigation. That the parking garage attack appeared to be an attempt at kidnapping, not protection. She said Yanis's criminal associations were concerning. But his honesty was noted. She said my testimony showed Sophia had strong, healthy attachments, that she was thriving. The judge ruled in favor of Giannis. Full custody maintained. With condition, continued therapy for Sophia. Regular home evaluation. No criminal activity on the premises. And supervised visitation for the Raptis family, 2 hours, twice a month. We won. Days 72 through 74 were a blur of joy. Sophia came home, finally understanding it was permanent. That Anna wasn't leaving, that Daddy had won. She talked constantly, asked 1,000 questions, laughed at everything. It was like watching a flower bloom in fast motion. Giannis was different too. Lighter somehow. He smiled more, held my hand in front of everyone, kissed me in the kitchen while Sophia giggled. We were a family, messy, unconventional, born from trauma and chaos. But ours, 3 months later, everything had changed. Sophia started preschool, real school, with other children. She was nervous the first day, held my hand too tight. But when I picked her up, she was chattering about her new friend Emma in the playground and snack time. She was just a normal little girl now. Mostly. She still had nightmares sometimes. Still went quiet when she was overwhelmed. But she was healing. We all were. Giannis had kept his promise to the judge. No criminal activity on the premises. He'd restructured his businesses. Not entirely legitimate. Probably never would be. But cleaner. Safer. He was trying. And that was enough. The Raptis family visited twice a month. Don Christos was stiff, formal, but Marco had surprised us. He'd started actually talking to Sophia, bringing her small gifts. It wasn't love, but it wasn't war anymore. And that was something. Giannis and I got married. Small ceremony, just us and Sophia and a judge at City Hall. No white dress, no reception, just vows and rings, and Sophia holding both our hands. She'd insisted on being part of it. Said, now we're really a family, like we hadn't been before. Like the paperwork made it official. Maybe she was right. That morning, the morning I'm telling you about now, started like any other. Sophia ran into our bedroom at 6:30, jumped on the bed, demanded pancakes. Giannis groaned. Pulled the pillow over his head. I laughed. Got up. Took Sophia's hand. We went downstairs. Started making breakfast together. She stood on a stool, helping me mix batter, getting flour everywhere. Giannis came down. Hair messy, still in pajamas. Wrapped his arms around me from behind. Kissed my neck. Said good morning. Sophia said, "You, Daddy." But she was smiling. We sat at the table, ate pancakes. Sophia told us about a dream she'd had. Something about unicorns and ice cream. Giannis listened like it was the most important thing he'd ever heard, and I sat there, watching them. This man who'd been so cold, this child who'd been so broken. Both of them laughing, both of them whole. I put my hand on my stomach, still flat, no sign yet. 6 weeks pregnant, nobody knew yet. Not even Giannis. I'd tell him soon. But right now, I just wanted this moment, this perfect, ordinary morning. Sophia reached for my hand, said, "Anna, you're happy?" I said, "Yes, sweetheart. I'm very happy." She said, "Good. Me too." Giannis looked at me, saw something in my face. He couldn't quite read, but he smiled. Said, "What?" I said, "Nothing. Just thinking." He said, "About what?" I said, "About how I thought I was just a nanny." He laughed, reached across the table, took my hand, said, "You were never just anything." And he was right. I'd come to this house broken, desperate, invisible, looking for a job. I'd found a family, found a man who saw me, a child who loved me, found myself. Sophia squeezed my hand, said, "Anna's ours forever, right, Daddy?" Giannis looked at me, said, "Forever." I said, "Forever," and I meant it. Because family isn't who you're born to. It's who chooses you, who stays, who fights, who loves you through the blood, and the chaos, and the courtrooms. We'd been through hell, and we'd come out the other side. Together. That's all that mattered. Sophia said, "Can we have more pancakes?" Giannis said, Absolutely. And we did. We sat there, eating pancakes, planning our day, being normal, being happy, being a family, the kind I'd never thought I'd have, the kind I'd almost lost, the kind I'd fight to keep forever.